Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I would like to welcome all of you to the first panel of the second day of the 7th ADSD. EPC dedicated the second theme of ADSD to shed light on a variable that will have a key role in defining features of the Middle East future. I mean, the Emirati-Israeli Peace Treaty. This theme includes 3 panels. The first panel focuses on analyzing the breakthrough achieved by Emirati-Israeli Peace Treaty, the agreement to establish diplomatic ties between the Kingdom of Bahrain and Israel, and the impact of the treaty on the regional weight of Arab Gulf countries. The panel will also foresee future positions of the rest of GCC countries on normalization, the ties with Israel. To discuss these issues, we are delighted to host in this panel a distinguished expert, Major General retired Amos Yeldin, who is the Executive Director of Tel Aviv University Institute for National Security Studies. And we are honored also to have with us His Excellency Dr. Sheikh Abdullah bin Ahmed Al Khalifa, who is the Chairman of the Board of Trustees at Bahrain Center for Strategic and International and Energy Studies. And last but not least, Dr. Al Badr Shatri, a former professor at UAE National Defense College in Abu Dhabi. I would like to welcome the speakers and thank them for accepting our invitation to take part in the debate and this panel in particular. I would also like to welcome all our viewers who are watching this panel on EPC's account on all various social media platforms, as well as on its YouTube channel and via Zoom application. Before I give the floor to the speaker, I would like to draw the attention of our Arab viewers that they can listen to simultaneous interpretation in Arabic by clicking on the French channel at the bottom of the 4C. Welcome, my guest. I would start with a question for all of you. Are the UAE Israel Peace Treaty and the joint communique on establishing peaceful and diplomatic relations between Bahrain and Israel an indication of the Gulf recalculations? I will start with General Amos.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm really honored to appear in your conference, Dr. Iftesam. I led an INSS delegation to Abu Dhabi last week. The hospitality was beyond any expectation, and we thank you very much. We found a very friendly and very professional group of researchers, which gave us the hope that the first steps of this peace is really successful. To your question, it's recalculation not only in the Gulf. I think it's a recalculation of the whole Middle East region. After 25 years of basically since the Oslo Accord, since the signing of the peace agreement between Jordan and Israel, we haven't moved forward on the peace process. We haven't moved forward on changing the formal relation between Arabs and Israelis. And I think the breakthrough will affect not only the Gulf, but the rest of the Middle East. We had some relation before, but the brave leadership of the UAE as well as Bahrain that decided to go forward, I think contribute a lot to the idea that peace has dividends. And peace is a better way to handle our relation than wars, hostility, and other, unfortunately, ways that relations between Israelis and Arabs were in the Middle East. I think the peace was an initiative of three leaders, President Trump, Prime Minister Netanyahu, and above all, Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed. The three of them together created a framework that contribute to the security and stability in the Middle East based on three pillars. One is canceling the annexation. Having an Israeli annexation could destabilize the Middle East and was a negative contribution to the stability and counter the right path of a peace expectation. So this is one important pillar. The second important pillar is normalization and peace that will have, as I already said, will show to the people in the Arab street, in the Israeli street, that peace can bring them a lot of benefits. Economic benefit, advance in technology, in medicine, in agriculture, and sharing the knowledge that we all possess. Last but not least is the stability and the fact that we face, unfortunately, enemies, or let's say rivals in the Middle East that trying to have hegemony in the Middle East, the superpowers, the regional superpowers of Iran and Turkey. It's not surprise for us that Ankara and Tehran didn't like the agreement. Because it's, once again, it's changing its recalculation, not only in the Gulf, but in the whole region of the Middle East. Thank you.
Thank you, General. Sheikh Abdullah, what is your take on this?
Well, first of all, Dr. Ibtissam, I would like to thank the Emirates Policy Center for organizing this timely debate, and for you personally, as a true friend, for inviting me to speak. To my co-panelists, Dr. Badr and in general, it's a pleasure to be here with you, along with the friends who are joining us online. This is, Dr. Ibtissam, the only downside of organizing this event virtually. We are used to being in the lovely capital of Abu Dhabi and having many friends and colleagues in the hall that we can see. But nevertheless, it's great to be here virtually with you. Addressing your question, Dr. Ibtissam, is it recalculation of the Gulf? Well, I would say that primarily the Abraham Accords that have been signed are not only a recalculation of the Gulf, but in fact it's an indication of the continuation of the long-standing policy of the promotion of peace and stability and the espousing of the values of coexistence. It is because we genuinely believe that more can be done and achieved with engagement and diplomatic relations than could be done without. The Gulf and Bahrain priorities particularly remain the same: to ensure regional stability and security, economic development, sustainable development, the promotion of moderate Islam, peaceful coexistence, and the containment of Iranian expansionist and malign behavior. The declaration of peace has enabled us to count another ally in the battle. I had the privilege of being in the White House on the 15th of September on the historical event, and following the first delegation that was welcomed to Bahrain on the 18th of October, led by US Secretary Mnuchin and the National Security Advisor Maya bin Shabat to Bahrain. That historical visit that, again, we have been planning for some time, I believe has set the foundation for great potential between Bahrain and Israel. I think that from what we have seen and discussed during the course of the 18th of October and following the establishment of diplomatic, peaceful, and friendly relations between Bahrain and Israel, along with signing 8 different MOUs on different sectors, would pave the way for a brighter future. Because this is not only about a bilateral relation between 2 countries in the region, it's about a choice of a nation, it's about the choice of a leader, it's about the choice of the people of Bahrain, who has been always calling for peaceful coexistence in the region. Bahrain is a successful model of peaceful coexistence. It is no secret that in Bahrain, different religions and denominations and faiths have been living peacefully side by side for centuries. We have a proud social fabric of Muslims, Christians, Jews, Hindus, Baha'is, who have been contributing to the development and stability of our country for many years. And peace-loving countries like Bahrain and the United Nations, who have always been calling in international and regional forums for the stability, for the peace of the region, for the peaceful coexistence. I believe the bold and courageous steps that were taken by His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi, and His Majesty King Hamad bin Isa towards establishing relations with Israel certainly paved the way towards a brighter future. It certainly recalculates the equation within the Gulf, but we have a common denominator of this equation, which is stability, security, and prosperity.
Thank you, Sheikh Abdullah. Dr. Badr, can you unmute yourself, please?
Good evening to you, Dr. Ibtisam, and thank you for the invitation, and also thanks for the EPC for organizing this. And also would like to welcome and greet my fellow panelists from Israel and Bahrain. And just to answer your question quickly, I think the Abrahamic Accord was born out of necessity, and the necessity is the geopolitical competition that is so pervasive in our region. Since 2011, especially with Erdogan policy, or rather the mug game of Erdogan and neo-Ottomanist policy, which led Turkey to establish many footholds in different places in the Middle East. And it represents political revisionism, representing political Islam, which includes the Ikhwan and Qatar, to upend the political system to the liking of Ankara. And then you have a second forces in the region, which is represented by revolutionary Islam, and that's Iran, which intervenes in different Arab countries, Iraq, Lebanon, Palestine, as well as Yemen and Syria. And probably it carries an ideology of revolutionary transformation. And perhaps I was thinking for a while, maybe it looks like a liberation theology, which calls for the support of the downtrodden, the poor, the masses, against the dominant order. Those are the two forces. And then you have the third forces, which is the status quo forces, which is represented by the Gulf state, led by Saudi Arabia, UAE, and of course, Bahrain. And those status quo had to come together. And Israel represents one of those forces of the status quo. And that's why you have this coalition of countries to face the menace, or what they perceive as a menace, from Turkey and Iran. But there is also another layer that brought those two countries together, UAE and Israel and Bahrain and Israel, is the gradual corrosion or erosion of the Arab state system that have seen a decline, especially since 1990 and the invasion of Kuwait. The Arab state system was a structure that shaped the foreign policy of different Arab states and provided leadership in the system to face external threats and challenges. Since the decline or the erosion of Arab state system, you had to have different countries, especially the core Arab states are now basically in chaos, and some of them are actually failed states like Syria and perhaps Iraq. So those are the core countries, and Egypt is perhaps busy with itself to play a bigger role as it used to be in the regional system. So this layer, the second layer, first is the geopolitical competition, the layer of Arab system erosion, and the third is there is no center of gravity at the international level, where United States seems to be withdrawn, at least, or in a relative decline that cannot play the usual role, the traditional role it used to play to maintain a political order within the Middle East or within our region. So those three factors at the three levels of analysis, domestic, regional, and international, brought those two countries together. I'll stop here.
Iftisam, you are mute.
I'm sorry. This question also goes to three of you. Based on that, are both peace agreements unconventional factor in the regional calculations and the game changer? What are the likely shifts in the map of power distribution in the Middle East after implementing the treaty? Amos, please.
Yeah, I think the game changer in the Middle East is not one event. We already heard from Sheikh Abdullah, His Majesty, on the American leaving the Middle East, or at least looking at the Middle East as less important region. It is not only Trump. It was Obama who pivot to the east, to the Pacific. And then in 2015, the JCPOA on Iran nuclear issue was signed, which was a big shock for the Israelis and the Arabs, and brings them closer. Then another negotiation with the Palestinians failed in 2014, with Secretary Kerry putting forward a framework that the Palestinians refused to say yes for. So I think what we see is a continuation of trends that were already there and we spoke about. The convergence of interest between the two sides and the convergence of values the two sides hold. Modernization, moderation, stability, and peace that we all believe in. So what is the potential here for a game changer? I think the potential is to show the public in the Middle East who is suffering from civil wars in Syria, in Libya, in Iraq, the negative influence of Turkey and Iran, that there is another way of having better relation, peace relation, that will trickle down to everyone, not only among leaders, but to the ordinary businessman, the ordinary citizen in the Arab state and in the Israeli state. I think the potential is also to move forward the Israeli-Palestinian track, because the Palestinians thought that they have a very strong card, the card of we are supported automatically by the Arab world, so we are not compromising anything. And unfortunately, the Europeans told them that if there is no two-state solution, Israel is doomed. It will be one-state solution. It was another factor that kept them in a very extreme negotiation position. So what we have now is an opportunity to tell the Palestinians, don't miss another opportunity. The UAE stopped the annexation for you, and now you can come to negotiate. With the new administration in Washington, it's even easier. So maybe it's a game changer in something that the Palestinians haven't figured out. But you in the Gulf did figure out that you can use this peace accord to promote the negotiation between Israelis and Palestinians. There is another potential, which is strategic potential. It's more cooperation among the Gulf state and Israel and the US to cope with Iranian terror activity, proxies of Iran who are destabilize the Middle East. We can cooperate here. We are not looking for war. We are not looking for clashes. But the fact that Iran will know that we are sharing intelligence, that we are together will cope with their challenges, I think is another opportunity for game changer in the Middle East. It is potential. We have to work on the details, on the grand plan, but if trust will be built among the leaders and among the people, we can all see a better Middle East.
Great. Sheikh Abdullah. Sheikh Abdullah, can you unmute yourself, please?
Well, I think the geopolitical map of power distribution in the Middle East has been shifting. In the sense, if we look at the past 2 decades, we will find that there are some countries that previously played a central role, and for reasons of civil war or insecurity or economic stagnation and a multitude of other things, no longer do. And if we look at the Gulf in particular, we would find that the Gulf has quickly been appearing as a frontrunner and leading the region towards peace, towards economic development, towards political and regional affairs. And we have seen that in the region, the Gulf states have relatively preserved its domestic security. It has continued to focus on positive economic development. It has continued to provide the necessary and advanced services to its people and the residents. And it has been attracting minds and from all around the world to reside in the Gulf. So there are very positive indicators that show that the Gulf is in a better off position. Forecasts indicate that the Gulf states, should they continue in the such positive economic development from now up until 2030, it will be the biggest, or let's say the 6th biggest economic bloc in the world. And this says a lot. As for the milestones that would indicate some game changers, the General has pointed out to a number of significant points, whether the signing of the JCPOA, whether the possibility of the American military decrease of its presence or not. But back in 2015, when the JCPOA was signed, many of us has thought or wanted to believe that this would bring about a new era in the region, even though the Gulf states were not involved in the discussions and the agreements that led to the signing of the JCPOA. Nevertheless, if we look into what happened back then, I would just like to draw the attention of our colleagues present in this session. In 2015, when the JCPOA was signed, we would have hoped that this would be an opportunity for Iran to be a responsible member of the region and of the international community. But instead, when the billions of dollars that were freezed prior to the deal were defreezed and channeled back to Iran, we would have hoped that these funds would have been invested domestically in Iran to upgrade its infrastructure, to deal with the mounting inflation, to create jobs for the young population, and to refrain from continuing supporting extremism and terrorism. But on the contrary, Iran has decided to continue with the path of destruction, of intervention in domestic affairs of countries in the region, and of continuing financing and funding their proxies, primarily Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, and other terrorist organizations. But this all reflects in numbers. And as with everything else, numbers speak for themselves. I invite you all to visit a very important portal, an online portal, the UNHCR portal. You would have the exact indications with numbers and timeframes on the number of refugees that have been leaving their hometowns and primarily towards Europe. The year 2014, according to the statistics of UNHCR, it had around 225,000 refugees from the region, particularly from the Middle East, that have fled towards Europe. In 2015, the number has quadrupled into just above 1 million. And then gradually it started to decrease. But what happened during that year that quadrupled the numbers of refugees and refugee influx towards Europe was the continuous channeling of funds towards areas of tension and the financing of terrorist and extremist organizations in hot tensions in the Middle East, which caused more instability, which undermined the security of many different countries in the region, which has led to more refugees to flee towards Europe. Now, that being said, this has been continuing for the past 5 years or so. With the current American administration, we have seen how economic pressures were put on Iran. And when you corner a cat, expect nothing but fight back, scratches from this cat. But again, when this campaign have started with economic pressure campaign, then it was elevated into a maximum pressure campaign and then into a super maximum pressure campaign. And we have seen how they have somehow economically squeezed the Iranian regime. But again, designating the IRGC as a terrorist organization, this wasn't in the horizon for many years that have passed. And it has always been known over the years that it has always been the IRGC. But no one has actually taken decisive action against the IRGC, and now the current administration has. But again, many are with the notion that the current Iranian regime are betting on a new US administration. And we are yet to see the final results of the American elections and yet to be reflected in the developments in the Middle East.
Dr. Badr, please. Unmute yourself, please, Dr. Badr.
Sorry. Regarding the game changer or strategic transformation of the Middle East, I think this is yet to be seen. If we see the results of the normalization between Bahrain and the UAE and Israel, leading to more countries joining this peace process, and we can create a region or a peaceful order. And actually, personally, I advocate for something like a Westphalia peace treaty for the whole region, where all countries, regardless of their orientation, regardless of their ethnic composition, regardless of whatever beliefs they hold, or whatever nationality they are, can coexist in peace and harmony. And if they cannot exist in harmony, at least they can exist in secure borders. Now, if the Abrahamic Accord can create such environment or such transformation, we can talk about game changer. But so far, I think the relationship, the bilateral relationship, is actually going at the speed that I did not expect. So the relationship is deepening and widening between Bahrain and Israel and between UAE and Israel. But what impact it will have in the future, this is something to be tested. The second is how much the new administration will deal with this Abrahamic Accord. Now, on record, the Biden candidate supported this process between those three countries. And by the way, contrary to many beliefs, Biden is very close to Israel. And I expect also the vice president to be the same. And I think can play a positive role moving forward and enlarging this peace process to include other state actors within our region, and especially to bring about a solution to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, which is actually the core conflict between the Arabs and the Israelis. So solving this problem will push us forward to a more stable and secure region. Absent of that, I think it'll be a hurdle. And publicly, I think there will be a great resentment. Now, the problem with Egypt and Jordan and Israel and the cold peace there, I think because they could not include and incorporate a solution to the Palestinian problem. And that's why it remained. I mean, for Egypt, it did all it could do to normalize with Israel, and Jordan did the same. But because there was no solution to the most important problem, publicly was not accepted. Now, I don't know what will happen. You are unmuted.
I disagree with you. I disagree. I think that was called because of the history of war, history of conflict. Yeah, that did not move people to people. Here you have different issue. Here you are talking about joint ventures. You are talking about business to business. So I think this is totally different issues. I mean, it's not about that if you didn't solve the Palestinian issue that we cannot go ahead. You have to bring other solution out of the box. And I think this is what the Emirati tried to do, and the Bahraini.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the relationship will go farther. But what I anticipate to enlarge the peaceful process, to make it, as you said, a game changer, you need to include. But as far as UAE, as I said, as far as UAE and Bahrain or other GCC countries, relationship with Israel depends on different fulcrum, which is the geopolitical competition and the economic benefit and economic exchange. But I was talking, now this is different, but I was talking of making the peace wider, regional wide, and including all actors and new actors. In order to do this, I think the Palestinian issue will play a bigger role. But let me go back to what I believe that the Biden administration will do.
Okay, Dr. Badr, we have another question regarding the administration. Just I want, before moving to this, I was discussing with Amos during his visit to Abu Dhabi that creating a model for success between the three countries that can encourage the others to join rather than waiting to solve all the problems, then move forward. I don't think this is the right way to do it. My question here goes to Amos. Are peace agreements considered a strategic shift for both parties as well as for some regional actors? At the same time, are they considered a shock for others? So what are the features of the map of winners and losers as a result of these agreements?
I think the big winners are, of course, the Emirates, the Kingdom of Bahrain, and Israel, if they will know how to create a different model of peace, as you just explained to us, how we can do joint ventures, how we can use our relation to overcome the deep depression that COVID-19 caused to the economies all over the place, how we can have better defense vis-a-vis the Millennium forces in the Middle East, and how we can promote the people-to-people relations that will create a very stable basis for the peace. There are small winners, Egypt and Jordan, because to their credit, they have been there first, but they suffered a lot of, they paid a price to their being first to have peace with Israel. In a way, Egypt was removed from a position of leadership in the Arab war, and Jordan paid the price. Now the fact that important nations like the UAE and Bahrain are joining, and hopefully some others in the future, will make their life easier. And this is a small win for Egypt and Jordan. It will help them, once again, to take the cold peace into a warm peace. And I think the losers are absolutely those who condemn the accord. It's Ankara, it's Tehran, and it's Qatar. These countries that are a threat to Israel, a threat to the UAE, and to Bahrain. And they are unhappy that Israel and the Sunni moderate, modern countries are making peace. Interesting, in my view, are the Palestinians, because it's up to them if they are winners or losers. If they will continue to have a very extreme position in negotiation, they will miss another opportunity. You know, the foreign minister of Israel in the 60s, Abba Eban, used to say that the Palestinians haven't missed an opportunity to miss an opportunity. So it could be another missed opportunity for the Palestinians, and they will be losers. If they will recalculate their position, if they will take you, the Arabs in the Gulf, as leverage vis-a-vis Israel, as partners to the negotiation that can support a moderate position in the Palestinian negotiation, I think they will be also winners. So it's up to them. last but not least, let's mention the leaders. I think Trump is a winner here, not in the election, but in his legacy. He is a winner because he brought peace very much like President Carter or President Clinton. And if he will be candidate for a Nobel Prize for Peace, it will be maybe something that will sweeten the defeat in the election. Netanyahu is a winner in this respect, joining Menachem Begin and Prime Minister Rabin in making peace with Arab countries. And they needed both of them, Trump and Netanyahu, the achievement, the diplomatic achievement for their elections. Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed is also a winner. He always led a realistic, moderate policy in the Middle East, and he waited to the right timing when he figured out that he can stop an Israeli annexation, and he achieved basically, he has a win-win-win achievement. Because those in Israel who didn't like the fact that there is no annexation as a win-lose, or they trade something for something. He basically got peace, he got cancellation of annexation, and he got new deliveries of advanced weapons from the US. So he is the big winner.
You are right, General Amos. I think Trump brought the peace, but the continuing this path, it's on the shoulder of those, the signatories for this peace and those whom they want to join, I call it peace train. Here I'm going to Sheikh Abdullah and Badr and asking about, although the agreement between UAE, Bahrain, and Israel, the extensive American efforts in making it succeed also make US another party to it. So what are the expectations for the trajectory of the US policy under Biden towards the Middle East in the light of these agreements? Sheikh Abdullah?
Well, we cannot talk about the declaration of peace without commending the efforts that were done by the United States and the leadership of President Trump and his administration. And when talking about the declaration of peace, many have said that there are winners and losers, as you have mentioned, Dr. Ibtissam. But to me, on this equation, it's quite very simple. So the winners are basically the countries and the people who would like to see peace, who would like to see development, who would like to see stability, and who would like to see prosperity. And to us, this has always been in our foresight moving forward. And on the contrary, people and countries who would lose with this particular declaration are those who would sow the seeds of hate, of sectarianism, of discord and intolerance in the region, whether they are Islamist terrorist organizations or state sponsors of terrorism. And chiefly, as mentioned by General Amos, Iran does put itself in that particular position. But again, many have spoken about the United States position in this, and what is the trajectory of the US policy towards the Middle East? Well, if we see what has been ongoing in the past 4 years in particular, many have said that there would be a reduction in the American presence in the region. And this has been reflected in many different fronts over the years. But the United States has been a historical and strategic ally for the region. And justice has to be due to the United States. If it wasn't for the United States of America, neither the United Arab Emirates nor Bahrain would have signed the declaration of peace with Israel. Yes, that has probably changed the dynamics, but it needed the leadership of a country like the United States to move forward. But the United States is an integral part of the security architecture of the region. Bahrain hosts the Fifth Fleet led by of the United States in Manama, and also the Combined Maritime Forces, which has been in Bahrain for many years now. The Combined Maritime Forces is an integral part of regional security. It's a maritime construct led by the United States. There are 33 countries involved in this maritime construct, from countries as far west as Brazil to as far east as Japan. All of them are based here in Bahrain to preserve the security and stability of the region. These particular contributions led by the United States here from Bahrain include the stability of the Arabian Gulf, countering terrorism, countering piracy, countering the illicit traffic of drugs and narcotics, countering the illicit trafficking of persons, and much more. So the American presence is here an integral part of the United States. Now, what has happened with Israel, it's more about the policy than the politics. Many have argued, and I'm tempted to put this forward and speak about it. Many have said that the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain is doing this in support of the United States. And you can connect the dots. But this is more about the policy towards peace and stability rather than the politics that surrounded what has happened. We genuinely believe that the strategic partnership that the United States has with us in Bahrain, and I can speak confidently that the same goes to the United Arab Emirates. Maybe Dr. Al-Badr could elaborate later on, but this is a partnership that is necessary for the stability of the region. And to us, what the United States has done and its leadership towards the ongoing framework of the newly established diplomatic ties is something that we see important and we see as strategic. And we do believe that what has been done and the leadership of the United States was very much needed during these challenging times that we all face.
Thank you, Sheikh Abdullah. You are right. I've been asked this question in many Zoom conferences I've participated that they're asking why UAE this time taking this decision. Is it because of the US election? Is it because of F-35? And always my answer, you cannot take a strategic decision, strategic move based on short term. It cannot be strategic. And I think UAE thought strategically, and this is not only now, it has been, to my knowledge, since 4 years, but it's only taking some of circumstances accelerated that, but it's not only for today. Dr. Badr, please. Can you unmute yourself, please?
Sorry. Well, no question that the United States underlies the security structure in the Middle East in terms of armament, training, and also direct military presence in the region and in other places. So the role of the United States will remain always very important, regardless who's in the White House, whether it's Democrat or Republican. And I was saying, I think Biden is committed. Now, the only thing I'm worried about Biden is that Biden is a transitional president. I mean, he already pledged that he'll be one-term president, and probably he will be grooming his vice president to run in 2024. But still, no matter what, I think the whole team that's coming from coming with Mr. Biden, which will be all his men, by the way, will not be Obama's, right? So Biden is his own man. It's not a continuation. I don't think it'll be a third term for Obama. Will be completely different. I think Biden is a politician, is a bona fide politician, and a very seasoned one. In case of Obama, he had some ideal streak in him that I don't see it in Biden. Biden knows international politics, forward, backward. He was in the Senate. He was the head of Foreign Relations Committee, and he was for 8 years the vice president. And I expect him to play an important role in moving this, what been started by the Trump administration and the Gulf states, forward to bring about more stability and security in the region. And there is no need completely, in my view, to worry that he will take the same approach that Obama took, which led basically to some conflict with the GCC and Israel itself. So I think Biden will play a positive role. Of course, there will be pressures on Biden from his left side in his party, and also from his right side, and also from different constituency. And he has sort of to juggle too many balls in order when he will formulate the policies toward the Middle East. And I think an early dialogue between those countries and the administration, the incoming administration, will be very helpful in paving the way to a more fruitful relationship between our countries, because we cannot, in this region, do without the US role. And also the US values, especially the Gulf, very much. I can go and elaborate on the mutual benefits between GCC state and the United States, and it's too numerous to list in just one session. But at any rate, I expect the Biden administration to play a positive role. And I see the relationship, the bilateral relationship at least, between our countries, whether it's Bahrain, whether it's UAE and Israel, will be moving forward regardless. But we can be a little bit ambitious and use this as a catalyst to sort of make this peace journal for a region that didn't see peace for quite some time. Thank you.
Thank you. General Amos, you talked that way in terms of losers. You mentioned Turkey and Iran. So what are the options for Iran and Turkey to weaken the chances of success of these peace agreements? What are the key potential ramifications for both powers as a result of these agreements?
I think even though they are unhappy, both countries can do little to disturb what the UAE, Bahrain, and Israel will choose to do, because both are now weakened because of COVID-19. Both have a huge problem in their economy and limited resources to handle what they're already handling. The Iranians are involved in 4 Arab countries. They have influence in Baghdad, Damascus, Beirut, and Sana'a. And the Turks, that a decade ago, their foreign minister, Davutoglu, called for 0 problems with the neighbors, now have problems with all the neighbors. And they are involved all over, vis-a-vis the Kurds in Turkey, but also vis-a-vis Iraq, Syria conflict, Cyprus, Libya, now Azerbaijan, vis-a-vis Armenia. So both of them are very busy with the campaigns that they already started. So even if they will decide to disturb this relation, beside terrorism, they hardly have a leverage to affect the relations that basically up to us. And in a way, they also understand that this peace agreement is not necessarily against them. It is not a military alliance. It's a value alliance. It's people-to-people alliance. And we are creating a different model. Because what the Iranians and the Turks are saying to the Arab crowd, to the Arab people, say, look at our model. It is a better model. Look at the Islamic Revolution. This is one model. And the other model is the Turkish model. So I think the Arab people are not impressed. And the way to have more influence vis-a-vis the people of UAE, Bahrain, and Egypt, and Jordan, and Saudi Arabia is to show a more successful model than Turkey and Iran are now showing us all. One last word about the United States. You know, there is a lot of concerns that the Biden administration will change the policy of Trump. When I look at the American foreign policy, it is in a very, very way quite identical and bipartisan, because the principle of America in the Middle East, no more wars after 20 years in Afghanistan and Iraq. We will promote peace and normalization everywhere. We don't need any more the oil. We have more oil than Saudi Arabia. And in a way, in a paradoxical way, we're protecting the shipping of oil to China. So this is not a key regional area. We shifted already to the Pacific. And above all, we don't want Iran to be nuclear. This is Obama, Biden, and Trump alike. So I don't see a radical change in the American position in the Middle East.
Thank you, General Amos. Well, here I would like to ask you better. How would major countries competing with the US and influential countries in the EU interact with these peace agreements? How would this be reflected on regional conflicts?
You mean the other superpowers, like China and Russia?
No, here I am talking, I'm sorry, I'm asking better. I'm talking about EU.
Ah, you're asking better, please.
Yeah, sorry, I'm asking
Yes,
better.
yes. I think, by the way, the EU, China, Russia, the major powers welcomed the normalization or the treaty between Bahrain and UAE and Israel. And I think, I mean, the EU especially will support all the peace process in the region, because they have far more interest, by the way, in a peaceful settlement in this region than anybody else, because it's very close to home, right? So the more you have problems in those regions, the more the immigrants you will have, the more you will have an export of terrorism, the more that the interest of those countries that are dependent on oil from the Middle East or from the Gulf specifically will be interrupted. But I would like to just take 1 second to sort of disagree with our colleague Amos regarding that the United States doesn't depend on Gulf oil anymore. I think this is a misconception about the oil market. Oil market is an integrated market. So when you have an interruption of oil export from the Gulf, it means prices will rise, which will mean also will be reflected in American oil production and American oil prices. So you cannot say, oh, forget about the oil in the Gulf and I have my own oil. Your oil is going to go up. Secondly, there are many trading partners for the United States, which is very important. They are dependent on oil from the Gulf, and they are dependent on the international market. So if you have interruption of this, they'll be impacted. A third and most important thing, for the United States in the Gulf is the fact that if there is a vacuum in the Gulf, will be filled by somebody else, which United States really fear, which will be its major rival, China. And we already seen movements between China and Iran and the declared strategic alliance. This will attract, I think, the US back more and more. By the way, I don't believe that the United States is completely withdrawing from the region. We can see the President of the United States in many, many fields, the economic, the finance, and even the military. And also, you know, the training, the intelligence exchange, and many, many fields. Secondly, I don't see that the United States will unplug its relationship with Israel. Israel is very important. As Biden himself said, if there were no Israel, the United States had to invent Israel. Israel is very important for us, for cultural, strategic, political, and also domestic politics. So all of those factors will bring back, even if the United States is trying to move from the region, it will come back. Finally, last and not least, if United States leave the Middle East, it doesn't mean that the Middle East will leave United States. We've seen what happened in 9/11. They might come after them for some reason or another, which will bring again the United States to the region. So all those factors makes the United States committed, as far as I'm concerned, committed in the region to be a solid one. And there is no other option except for US to play a role in this region. Thank you.
Thank you, Badr. Sheikh Abdullah and Abush, this is both a question, and if you want to elaborate on that, Badr, feel free. Sheikh Abdullah, can the three parties to the treatment employ their strategic alliance with the US, their strategic partnership with China, and their distinguished ties with Russia to make the process of redistribution of power in the Middle East succeed? Will the competitive relationship between the great powers overlap negatively with the agreement and their objectives?
Well, I believe, speaking from a Bahraini perspective and looking into the American foreign policy, yes, there might be disagreements on certain issues of foreign policy between both parties within the United States system, but the issue pertaining to Israel remains a bipartisan issue. Even with the change of administration, this will not change. We have seen how the President-elect Biden has been a long-standing supporter of Israel, and we certainly do believe that any upcoming American administration would continue its support to this. And whether or not other global powers would view this in the sense as the restructuring of positive developments in the region, I believe with this case of Bahrain, and I believe equally speaking about the United Arab Emirates, we have been able to maintain good relations with everybody, whether with the United States as a strategic ally, but also with other global powers like China and Russia. And both have supported what has been agreed upon and signed. I've noticed there are a couple of questions within the chat. Vincenzo has asked us if there is any role for the European Union. Well, we have seen and heard nothing from the European Union but support. And many governments and many leaders have praised the steps that were taken by Bahrain and the United Arab Emirates towards establishing diplomatic and peaceful relations with Israel. And I believe the support of the European Union is very much important. And many European countries have been historically present and involved in the region. And to that sense, we do see that the European Union has a positive role to play. The European Union is involved in major discussions, whether with the JCPOA or other global affairs. But whatever stability that is achieved in the region, it would have an immediate ripple effect on Europe on many different fronts. We do see how the socio-economic impact of the current challenge with the COVID is impeding developments in many different fronts. But again, the challenges remain on the surface. Now, addressing the main point that, again, I see through the chat and the questions that has been raised quite frequently by Mohammed Baghali.
I will take the responsibility of the chat. Leave it.
Sure, I will. So back to you.
Okay. Now, I'm talking about the major powers competition. I mean, related to my question, China and Russia, and will this competition between the great powers overlap negatively or with agreements and their objectives?
Yeah, I think I fully agree that Americans are not leaving the Middle East. However, they signal that the Middle East is less important to them. There is no doubt about it. Yes, they don't need oil anymore for the pump, but the price of oil will be decided in the Gulf. So the US, from an Israeli perspective, is a very important, maybe the only ally that we can trust from A to Z. They support us with strategic alliance. They support us with defense assistance. And the most important, they support us in the UN Security Council to veto any anti-Israeli resolution. The US has hard power, as it was described here, bases in the Middle East, the Fifth Fleet, the Sixth Fleet, the big Air Force, and they have soft power. The Chinese decided that they are not using military power. They have more patience. They will use their soft power, and they will plan, unlike the Western culture that is planning for the next quarter, for the next primary, they will plan for generation to be strong leg in the Middle East based on economy, investment, and economy power. The Russians is on the contrary. They hardly have economic power. The GDP of Russia is less than the GDP of Italy, but they do have military power. And they do have leadership that sometimes use a different rules of engagement to use their military power. But Russia must be distinguished to have very good relation almost with every pair of enemies in the Middle East. The Iranians and the Saudis, the Turk and the Kurds, the Israeli and the Palestinians, the Qatari and the UAE. So Russia has influence, China has influence, but none of them has the variety of soft and hard power that the US has. But the US, as I said, unfortunately sending signals that it's less interested. I fully buying the analysis of my colleague about the fact that the US still need the Middle East. I hope that they are listening very carefully to you, Dr. Badr.
Dr. Badr, do you have something to add here?
Yes, I want to add, actually, the theory is this, that the competition between China and the United States will not be different than any great power competition. Now, 12 out of 16 of those power transition led to war between the rising power and the declining power. That's Graham Allison thesis of destined for war that he is expecting, but it could be managed. Now, can you imagine in a scenario where the conflict or the Cold War or the hot war will be heightened between the two giants? Who do you want to be on your side? You want to be on your side the source of energy for the world. There is no other place in the world that has a concentration of oil and energy like the Gulf. You don't want your rival to have his hand or its hand on this region. So I think Biden administration or different administration or Trump in 2024, whatever it comes, I think they understand the important and significant in the competition between. By the way, I can enumerate other, by the way, there is market, there is petrodollar recycling, there is also pegging to the dollars, there is nominating the prices of oil with dollars that maintains and sustains the dollar hegemony in the world. So all of those factors tend to point to the fact that it'll be very difficult, even if there is an intention to withdraw. The Middle East will pull them back because of this multiple interest. Now, if United States will abdicate as a world leader, then it's different ball game. It will allow other powers, it will allow the multipolar system to come and establish their influence. But knowing United States, I don't think they will do that. Despite what Mahbani said yesterday, that the Chinese have no interest in spreading their influence. And I sent him a question, but he didn't answer or wasn't picking up. That countries don't become hegemonic because they choose. Countries become and evolve into hegemonic powers. And China will not, their behavior as a state in the world system will be any different than the French or the British or the Americans or the Italians or the Germans, or the Japanese or any other country. Once they get that power, once they pass United States, they already, by the way, passed United States in 11 indicators of power, the relationship of China with the world will change with it. Thank you.
I'll go to pick some of questions from the viewers, and here one question from Neil Patrick Amos. What if Erdogan lost the elections in 2021? How it will affect the perspective of Turkey towards the agreement between Israel and the Gulf?
Yeah, I think that the big question is whether the elections will be a fair election, free election, or Erdogan, with his mechanism of controlling almost every important source of power in Turkey, will manipulate the election. Assuming Erdogan will be defeated, here we come to, I think, very important question. Whether the new president of Turkey will take it back to the pre-Erdogan policy, which basically the traditional Atatürk policy, which is modern Turkey, Western orientation, looking for relation with Europe, and not the political Islam Muslim Brotherhood kind of Turkey that Erdogan led. For many years, I thought that Erdogan, with his personality, leading Turkey, and when he will disappear, his ideology and policy will disappear. I'm not sure anymore. I'm not sure that it haven't trickled down to the basis Turkey state and all the mechanism of Turkey, the military, the judiciary, the people in the street. This is a huge question that I don't have an answer until we reach the point.
There's another question for you, General Amos, and this is coming from Dr. Aziz Barazani from Kurdistan. how Israel is looking to the conflict between Qatar and other GCC countries.
I think Israel is supporting the demands of the GCC countries vis-a-vis Qatar. We feel the same uncomfortable position that Qatar is taking in a couple of areas. Al Jazeera inciting against the moderate forces and the peaceful forces in the Middle East. Qatar allying with Iran in many cases, not always, but they know how to maneuver, and they are not in the position that Israel very much see as the right position of the GCC countries like Saudi, UAE, Bahrain, that see Iran as a regional threat. So if Israel has to choose, we are not hesitating. However, Israel is looking to have relation with every Arab country that's willing to have relation with us. And Israel is using Qatar policy that can ease the tension and prevent another round of hostility in Gaza. And Qatar is supporting Gaza with $1 million every month, and Israel is not preventing it from happening. But we are not hesitating a second. Our diplomatic support is fully to Saudi Arabia, UAE, Bahrain, the countries that see Qatar as a negative policy in the Middle East.
Thank you.
Can I come in?
Yes, Badr.
Yeah, regarding Turkey, by the way, I think we are past the point where Turkey can go back to its old Kemalist heritage. I think now political Islam became a factor. But which kind of political Islam, which foreign policy will depend on who is in power. Now, if a guy like Daoud Oglo comes to power, I believe he will continue with Islam, with a mixture of Islam and democracy, but actually he will be open to a more better relationship between Turkey and its neighbors. I think for Erdogan, in the beginning, to tell you the truth, was a success story. I mean, even Western powers wanted us all to become like Turkey, right? In peace with our religion and also in peace with the world. We have modernity, democracy, political participation, economic growth, and everything, right? So what happened is 2011, when they witnessed the rise of political Islam, and Erdogan, being very ambitious man, thought he can ride this winning horse into a bigger influence in the Middle East. This is what sort of the miscalculation of Mr. Erdogan. But if other elites in Turkey, even from the former allies of Erdogan, I think they can have a better relationship and they can be. Second, I think EU here can play. Erdogan and Turkey were playing a positive role and productive role when they had some hope of accession to the EU. Once they lost that accession bid, they became more and more interested in the Middle East, not in a positive way, but in a very negative way. So I think it all depends on different factors who will come to power.
Sheikh Abdullah, there is a question from Muhammad al-Qali. He's asking, will strengthening Gulf relations with Israel contribute to an increase in tension with Iran, or will it push towards calm with it?
Well, I think the peace agreements, the declaration of peace that was signed is a strategic nightmare for Iran, because Iran has always used the Arab-Israeli enmity as a buffer for its its interventions in the regional affairs. And I think that once this is dealt with and peace is declared, and the buffer that Iran has been lying on for so long is no longer there, then it would make no more sense for them to continue their nefarious behavior in the region. But that being said, I think, there are two arguments. One, some would argue that there's a notion that this would heaten up the tensions with Iran, but this is not any sort of political arrangement or security arrangement against any country in the region. To us in Bahrain, we prefer to do everything transparently, openly. That is why, even though many have said that there is intelligence cooperation between Bahrain and Israel and many different developments on that end, we made it public in Bahrain. And probably for the first time, it has been announced that a meeting that was held between the head of the Bahraini intelligence with the head of the Mossad in Bahrain, publicly published in the Bahrain News Agency. If we think about that, who would announce a meeting between the heads of two intelligence agents? Bahrain did, for a simple reason, that we have nothing to hide. If there is intelligence cooperation, yes, there is intelligence cooperation for the benefit of the region, for the stability of the region, for the security of the region. And building ties with any security architect to do so, we will do so. And hence, if Iran believes that this new relation would heat up tensions in the region, it's for them to believe so. For us, for the past 4 decades, we haven't seen any tensions but from the other shore of the Arabian Gulf. To us, speaking of the moderate Gulf states, we have done nothing but respect to our neighbors, respecting their domestic affairs, working collectively for the prosperity of our people, of our nations, focusing on development, focusing on building bridges and partnerships with our friends and allies across the world. We do not want to see this as part of tensioning relations in the region, but rather as a positive development to build bridges between people and nations for the development and the stability of the region.
Sheikh Abdullah, General Amos, Dr. Badr, thank you very much for this fruitful discussion and excellent presentation, and hope to host you again, but not in virtual. Hope next year, but reaching this vaccine from Pfizer give us a window of hope that we will hold Abu Dhabi strategic debate, the 8th, not virtual, but in reality. Thank you very much for this discussion, and hope to host you again. And for all our viewers that we will have after half an hour, there is another session. It will look to the same topic, but how this will impact Iran and Turkey. Join us, please, after half an hour. Thanks for our panelists, and thanks for those whom they send their question and they join us by attending this. Thank you all. مع السلامة.
Thank you for having us. مشكورة دكتورة، ما قصرتي.
شكرا جزيلا.
Thank you very much. See you next year.
إن شاء الله.
Thank you. See you all. See you all. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Bye.